Bloomtown, A Different Story is a narrative-led, turn-based RPG that comes out today. It also features social sim elements and monster taming. All of this is based against a story with a creepy, light horror backdrop. If it seems like the game is trying to do a lot, well, it is. I was initially made aware of this game when I saw a trailer for it during the Summer Games Fest of 2023 in the absolute nightmare that was the PC gaming show. The trailer for Bloomtown managed to really stand out to me, which is impressive due to seeing it at the tail end of the whole Summer Games Fest event after watching hundreds of trailers at that point and kind of hitting a personal low point of morale after watching 2 hours of this. Bloomtown has been on my radar ever since, and today I finally get to play it. So let's take a look and see if Bloomtown can capitalize on its very ambitious premise. Full disclosure, before we start the review, I was given a review copy of this game, and while I don't believe this has any influence on how I treat this game in the review, I do think it's important to be as transparent as possible with you all. I'm just going to be upfront with you when I say that this game is heavily inspired by Persona. And to stop myself from repeating the words just like Persona and unlike Persona 100 times throughout the review, and for the sake of those who are unaware of the Persona series, I'm just going to explain the game as is. And I'm very well aware of the derivative nature of Bloomtown, but I don't want to spend half the runtime of the review talking about Persona. But if you are a Persona fan, then you'll be able to see all the similarities for yourself. Bloomtown, A Different Story is about Emily and her little brother Chester, who are off to visit their grandfather for the summer at a little town called Bloomtown. Emily and Chester have been sent off while their parents were through some stuff. It isn't long before Emily and Chester figure out that something isn't quite right with Bloomtown, with mysterious disappearances, portals to the underworld, demons, and God knows what else going on. Emily is our main playable character for the game. She's a fairly adventurous 12-year-old girl. There is a lot of player choice in the dialogue, so her personality is more up to us as the player to kind of figure out. A lot of the dialogue does tend to be very jokey and sarcastic. The dialogue does feel like it is a bit more advanced than what most 12-year-olds would be capable of. Same with Chester, who I'm guessing is meant to be around 10. Again, his dialogue seems to be a bit above his age, but he's definitely portrayed as the younger, more immature out of the two. Now, I do think that the dialogue and writing in Bloomtown is very good, but the reason I mentioned like this specifically is because I did have a hard time at first gauging how old these kids are meant to be, because they look like they're under 10, but they speak like they're like in their late teens. While Emily is the main playable character, in typical RPG fashion, we do have party members like Chester, who I already mentioned. We also have Ramona, who is a local girl with a police officer stepdad that she doesn't get along with. And the last one to round out our party is Hugo, who is a talking corgi, who goes from the cutest boy that I just want to pet to, oh god, he's going to pet me and call me a good boy. We can build relationships with these characters and learn more about them. I liked each of the main characters. They all have well-defined traits. Hugo is always going to be the more sensible one, Ramona is going to be the more emotional, and Chester is the immature one. With Emily kind of just being left up to us to how she acts from situation to situation. Outside of the main four characters, we have a pretty decent amount of side characters spread out throughout the town. This is where the writing and the story gets a little weak in my opinion. A lot of the characters just don't feel like they have that extra dimension to them, especially characters introduced like towards the latter half of the story, and also when it comes to the main villains. Now, in each different story arc, there is a mission to solve, a dungeon to conquer, and a main villain to face. Each dungeon will have little ghostly apparitions that like explain some of the villains' motives, which I love, but most of the villains aren't explored in enough depth. The concepts, motivations, and themes are usually solid, but the story kind of lacks the ability to expand on those things in a very meaningful way. For the most part, anyway. There were times I was kind of surprised by Bloomtown's ability to tackle some interesting and sometimes fairly dark subject matter, but there was one part of the game that kind of fumbled what I felt like could have been slam dunk story beat. Without spoiling the story, after the second main story arc finishes and beating the main villain, the third story arc starts before until the second one is fully resolved. And I feel like I couldn't buy into the main story arc emotionally because I was still invested in the second one, which hadn't kind of fully concluded. I feel like the game should definitely have just resolved the second one first, and because of the way it ends, it felt like it just needed time to breathe. I also just feel like that there was a lot more potential to be explored within the story of Bloomtown, and by the time I finished my playthrough with this game, I felt like I was left a little bit unsatisfied. I can't tell if that was because of the story or that I might have been just comparing it to that other game. Moving on to gameplay, Bloomtown's gameplay is separated into two parts. The first being just the life sim stuff. This is where you can explore the town, do side quests, hang out with friends, and it plays exactly how it looks. The game has a day-night system, so doing activities such as fishing, reading books, farming takes up your time. A lot of these activities can affect your stats. Hanging out and leveling up your friendship can give you combat perks. The activities serve to enhance Emily's personality stats, which are mostly just used for dice roll stat checks. The second part of the game is the underside, and this is where a majority of the game's combat happens, where we explore dungeons and where a lot of the stats will come into play. The game's combat is entirely turn-based, and our enemies are always demons. Each of the four main characters have a melee weapon, a gun, and a personal familiar that grants them a few skills or spells. Each different demon you face has strengths and weaknesses based on certain elements, which you have to exploit if you not only want to kind of win, but also capture the demons. Capturing a demon requires you to down all of the enemies you are currently fighting by stunning them, either with a stun weapon or exploiting their elemental weaknesses. And when they're down, then you'll have to pass a stat check. When you capture a demon, you can set it as one of your party members' familiars, changing their set of skills. There is also a system that you can use to fuse demons together that you've caught to make their stats stronger, and it has a chance to give them a new spell from one of the demons that you fused. This can be done for any party member, and it leaves room for quite a bit of customization in terms of how you want your party set up. The only thing I didn't like about this part of the game is the fusing aspect itself. Demons feel like they give pitiful XP when it comes to fusion and leveling them up. When you reach the threshold of leveling up one of the demons, there is only a chance that the demon will gain a skill, and that skill that you gain will be random. I think the system would be better with the randomness just completely taken out, and maybe just if the game was a little more generous XP wise, just to make the system feel more worth the effort it takes to engage with it. That being said, it is a small downside to what is honestly a very good combat system, even if it might be a little bit derivative. Now, while the map of Bloomtown and its different zones feel fairly large, a lot of it can be bypassed with quick travel, and you will need to quick travel a lot in this game, partially because of the day-night system. Some shops are only going to be open during certain parts of the day on certain days, and the other reason is quests will often have you just going everywhere. Quests were a little difficult to wrap my head around sometimes. What I meant to do sometimes felt straightforward, but other times the instructions just felt extremely vague. Most of the time the information is there somewhere, but I just kind of missed it. In the pause menu there is a conversation log, which you can use to refer back to what dialogue you've seen. There's also a quest guide, which will often give you more hints on what you're actually supposed to do, but if you press the map button, there is a hints page that will show you the area where you're meant to go. 99% of the time, using a combination of these three things will get you through if you're stuck. And I wouldn't be surprised if you do get stuck, because sometimes the instructions on what you're meant to do can just be vague. Sometimes I felt like I didn't know if I'd finished a quest. Sometimes I didn't know if I even got rewarded for finishing a quest. It felt a bit strange, but once you kind of get used to how the game functions, it actually does feel a bit more intuitive. Quick traveling does alleviate a lot of what could have been a very monotonous part of the game. Speaking of something that I like, the art style of Bloomtown is easily my favorite part of the game. The pixel art is just well on point, with most of, if not all of the environments, it look amazing. Character design is great, everything from each of the monsters feeling distinctly unique to the four main party members and all of their different animations. Everything feels very smooth. And I honestly can't say that much bad about it, although if I had to say something that could have been done just a little bit better, maybe a bit more could have been done in the backgrounds, in the dungeons. I would have loved to have seen like some more creepy animated things going on about the place. In the first dungeon, there was this creepy looking creature in the picture frame, which I really liked, but that was kind of like the only thing that was like kind of moving around and like adding to this unsettling atmosphere. Because like a bit further on, there was this room with a giant octopus. You have to cross over these tentacles to move around the room, and I was kind of expecting something to happen, but nothing did. The octopus didn't even blink, which made it feel less like a creepy creature and more just a part of the environment. I mean, it looks cool, but it would have been nice like to be unsettled by it, if you know what I mean. Even if nothing is going to happen, I would have liked to have thought that something could have happened. And even though the game does get creepier with its environments as the game goes on, I just don't think it ever reaches the heights of creepy and unsettling that it could. Listen, the game looks amazing, and there's never a part where I feel like nothing belongs in this game art-wise. The art style is just so well defined, but it just also has a lot of versatility, and there's a lot of creativity, the monster designs, and I love it. Next up, I'd like to talk about the music, which I did enjoy. I especially liked the atmospheric tracks. Pretty much everything works with the art style of the game. It does everything that it needs to do. A good atmospheric track needs to be able to be listened to for a decent period of time, and I could say that it fades into the background nicely, and I never got sick of it, and that's the same for any of the atmospheric tracks throughout the game. The exception to this is the combat music, which I did enjoy for the first 8 hours. I'm gonna break my Persona rule for a second here because these combat tracks feel like they were torn straight out of the Persona 5 soundtrack. If I had heard these songs in a vacuum without knowing of Bloomtown's existence, I would have said that these tracks came from Persona. The problem is that there are only 3 or 4 different tracks that play out in total during combat. They aren't enough to sustain the total game time, because by the end of the game, I was well and truly sick of these songs. Just needed maybe another 2 songs just to kind of break it up a bit, because it started to get on my nerves. And look, by the end of my time with Bloomtown, the biggest problem that I found is that none of all of the systems that this game has work very well in conjunction with each other. The RPG systems and the world of Bloomtown feel like they could sustain a 40-hour game easily, but there's only enough story to cover maybe 12 hours and enough music for 8. A lot of the aspects of the game needed to be expanded on or had its focus narrowed. There's a lot that this game tries to do, and for the most part it does it all right, but the game is just juggling a lot and it's ambitious to a fault. Like, no part of this game ever gets close to being bad, nowhere near, but it just struggles finding the right balance between everything. By the time I had finished Bloomtown, I was sitting at around 19 hours of total playtime. I did go AFK a couple of times, so I'd put the time to beat the game close to probably 17 hours. That is with me doing quite a bit, although not all of the side content. So I would say a bare minimum playthrough would be around 14 to 15 hours. Well, I reckon a full completion of the game would probably put you more towards 20 hours of total game time. And for all of Bloomtown's faults, I still enjoyed myself with this game quite a bit. The game wasn't so long that it felt like a chore to complete, and it's definitely a game that I reckon I will return one day to play again. The game will be retailing at $25 US when it comes out on Steam, which I think is more than a fair asking price for the experience that you get with this game. And I would absolutely recommend this game, faults and all. But I think if you're a fan of turn-based RPGs, then you will find something to like in this game. And to the Persona fans out there that want a similar experience but don't want to commit to another 80-hour playthrough of the game, Bloomtown has you covered. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked the video, please leave it a like, and if you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Thanks to my YouTube members, Controlled Killer, Yellow, and Melodia. If you think my content is worth supporting via a YouTube membership, the option is there, perks are on the screen. I also have a community Discord, which is free to enter, as well as a Steam curator page, links to everything in the description down below. And if you have any ideas for future games that you want me to cover, then leave a comment below. Thank you again for watching the video, and I will see you all in the next one, whatever that may be.